and welcome. I'm gonna get this over here. And welcome to another live reading stream. Tonight, we're going back to reading the Five Nights at Freddy's book. Now, before I begin, a few things I want to say. First and foremost, I apologize for not doing this sooner than I was meant to. I actually woke up at about 12:30 today, and then I fell asleep and woke up at about 2.5 hours. It was like 12:30, somewhere between there. And then I woke up between 2:30. I think it was more 2:30 than 2 o'clock. But yeah, I woke up a bit late today, so I didn't really, so I wasn't able to do what I said I was wanting to do last night. But, anyway, that goes to what I'm gonna try to do here for this stream. As you guys know, I am on chapter 17, but I am actually about 7 chapters away from finishing the book. So what I might do, well, technically 8, because again, I sometimes like to count the epilogue as a bit of a chapter in itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to read the rest of this book all the way through to the end. But if I feel tired, yeah, I'll end the stream after I finish the chapter there. But that's what we're gonna try to do tonight. So maybe I'll be able to finish it, maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. Also, hello, Daniel Berry. How are you doing tonight? Good to see you. But anyway, without further ado, let's start and possibly finish the last section of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, because then we can finally watch the movie that this book was based off of, and see if there's even remote differences between the book and the movie. I say remote differences because, for the most part, I'm pretty sure the book has very much gotten what was shown in the movie, but there may be a few bits and pieces that are not in the movie that are in the book. Because they sometimes do that. Put things in the book that aren't in the movie, even though it's supposed to be based on the movie. But anyway, there's that. Also, I also want to point out that right now, currently, on the community poll that I posted about like 3 or 4 days ago, I'm doing a poll to see which book of the 4 books that I've chosen for the month you guys would want me to start off with first. So far, Stephen King's Night Shift is winning by 2 votes. If you guys want to vote on it as well, the community post is, well, the poll is in the community tab, very first thing you should be seeing. And there you go. That's how you vote. Or if it's on your homepage, you can vote that way. If it's ever on your homepage, you can vote that way as well. But without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 17. Mike carried his limp sister through her bedroom doorway. She'd fallen into a deep sleep in the car, and she'd snored most of the way home. He thought she might wake up when he lifted her out of the car, but she was totally out of it. I guess playing with animatronics is exhausting, Mike thought as he gently placed Abby in her bed. Mike was trying to keep his mood light, but he wasn't really feeling it. The truth was that he was thoroughly frazzled by the night's events. Mike pulled Abby's bright red blanket up to her shoulders. He watched her chest rise and fall slowly for a few seconds. Then he turned and started toward her door. As Mike passed Abby's desk, his gaze landed on a pile of drawings. He hesitated, and then he stepped over to pick them up. Mike usually didn't pay a lot of attention to what Abby drew. Yes, he'd seen the drawings she'd done that included him, but he hadn't looked at anything she'd drawn lately. Given what had happened at Freddy's, Mike had a sudden feeling that he should see what his sister had been up to. Hold on a second, the camera's a little too high for my liking. Hold on. There you go, that's better. That's better. Marvelous. Marvelous. If you guys know who I'm referencing there with saying that line, you know. But if you don't, I'll give you a hint. It's a line that was said in a game by Rare that came out in 2000 for the Nintendo 64, which would ultimately be released on the Xbox as a re-release in 2005, I believe it was. But moving on. Expecting to see Abby versions of the animatronics at Freddy's, Mike flipped through the drawings, and he nearly dropped them. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Abby's drawing had improved a lot over the last year. She was no Picasso, but what she drew was usually recognizable. The drawings Mike held in his hand were clearly recognizable. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Mike held in his hand a whole series of drawings of Abby playing with the children from his dream. And one of them. Mike pulled the fourth drawing from the pile. Frowning at it, he placed the others back on Abby's desk. He folded up the drawing he'd taken and put it in his pocket. By the time dinner rolled around, Mike felt like a limp noodle. After he'd put Abby to bed, he'd try to sleep himself. Visions of Abby's drawings, however, kept Mike awake. He was only able to get a few snatches of dreamless sleep. He'd finally given up and tried to jumpstart his body with his usual regime of push-ups. The exercise had woken him up enough to be functional, but he'd still dragged all day. All day Mike tried on and off to get a hold of Max. Why had she flaked out on him? Sure, he hadn't paid her, but it wasn't like her to just ignore him. Somehow, Mike made it through the day. He even put together a meal, grilled cheese sandwiches, and canned tomato soup, and now, shockingly, Abby was eating it. First and foremost, I do want to point out, even though I've never really eaten the combination, I've heard that the two of them seem to go together, like chips and dip, nachos with cheese, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Watching Abby plow through her sandwich, Mike leaned back in his seat and spun his spoon around and around on the kitchen table. Pleased with his sister's appetite, Mike inhaled the tang of the soup and the cheddar cheese he'd put in the sandwiches, and he tried to relax. But the thoughts in his brain were too much of a thicket with thorns. Abby finished the sandwich and raised her soup bowl with both hands. She slurped down the soup and put down the bowl. She let out a loud burp, being like, "Mm." Giving Mike a sideways glance, she giggled and said, "Excuse me." Mike put his elbows on the table. "Abby, we need to talk." Clearly noticing that Mike's serious tone, Abby frowned. "I said, excuse me." Mike waved a hand. "Not about that." He leaned forward. "You know what happened last night isn't normal, right?" Abby wiped the soup mustache from her face. "I'm not stupid, Mike." "No, you're not." Mike chewed on the inside of his cheek. How to word this? "So, the machines," Mike began. "My friends," Abby corrected. "Sorry, your friends." Mike collected himself. Uh, are they ghosts?" "Okay," Mike thought. "That was easier than I'd expected." "Yeah," he said. Abby tilted her head and gave Mike a way to catch on, Captain Obvious look. "Of course," she said. "How else could they make the robots move?" Mike nodded. "So they're kids then, like you?" Abby nodded and then shook her head. "They're younger," she clarified. And they've explained to you how they got to be the way they are now? Abby dropped her gaze to her empty soup bowl, her shoulders hunched inward. They don't like to talk about it. Abby lifted her head. She pushed her bowl toward Mike. Can I have more soup? Almost glad for the distraction, Mike took the bowl and jumped up. Sure. Mike stepped to the stove. A half-empty pot of soup sat on one of the burners. He knew the soup was cold, so he turned the burner on. He thought he was doing a very good job of acting like he was having a perfectly ordinary conversation with his 10-year-old sister. Doesn't everyone talk about ghosts at the dinner table? Mike's patient, calm demeanor wasn't as genuine as Abby probably thought it was. Inside, his adrenal glands were in overdrive. Mike had an agenda, but he thought he had to get at it in a roundabout way. Mike picked up a wooden spoon and stirred the soup as it started to steam a little. You know we used to have a brother, right? He asked Abby without turning around. Garrett. I know I don't talk about him. Neither did Mom and Dad, Abby said. Mike blinked. He was surprised Abby remembered. She never spoke about their parents. She'd only been three when their mom had died and their dad had left. It was hard for them, Mike said. Hard for me, too. Mike turned away from the stove and dug into his pocket. He pulled out the folded up drawing he tucked away earlier that day. Mike handed the folded drawing to Abby. Can you explain this to me? Hold on a second. There it is. Yeah, sorry about that. Just trying to do some stuff over here on the table. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Abby spread open the drawing on the table. She looked down at it. Mike didn't need to look at it again. He knew it was the drawing of a black car with a blurry-faced child. A child clutching an orange toy airplane in the back window. Abby looked at Mike, her face tight. She pressed her lips together and blinked several times. A classic "you caught me" look. Do you know what that is? Mike retook his seat and pointed at the drawing. Abby didn't speak. She studied the table. I'm not mad at you, Abby, Mike said. I'm not mad at you, Abs, Mike said. I just want to know. Another few seconds passed. Then Abby said, It's when Garrett got taken. Mike leaned forward. Little fireworks of excitement were sizzling through his whole body. Who told you about this, Abby? More silence. Was it a little boy with blonde hair? Mike pushed. Abby nodded. I don't know his name. But he's one of your friends? Mike asked. Yes. And when did you meet them? Before Abby could answer, spitting fizzle came from the stove. Mike looked over to see the soup boiling over. He leaped up and shifted the pot to a cold burner. He turned off the stove. Mike turned back to Abby. She had picked up her napkin and was tearing it into little pieces. She was very clearly upset. Mike crouched down next to her. He put a hand on the drawing. Abby, he said in the gentlest voice he could muster. This is very important. Did the blond boy ever say anything about the man who was driving the black car? Mike tapped the car in the drawing. Please, think hard. Abby shook her head. No, he didn't. Abby looked up and frowned at Mike. He knew he hadn't hidden his disappointment. But, Abby began. Yes? Can I ask him? Abby asked. Mike let out a long pent-up breath. This was where he'd been heading all along. He smiled, doing... I'd really appreciate it if you would. Hey, Withered Golden Freddy, how you doing tonight? Vanessa looked at her watch to see that Freddy's front door claimed shut behind her, beyond her. It wouldn't be long before Mike got here. Vanessa glanced around the empty lobby. The walls still had gaping holes and all the poster frames were bare of glass, but the floor had been swept up. Mike was busy last night, she thought. Vanessa's boots thudded on the floor as she strode forward, heading through the archway into the dining room. She looked around and nodded in satisfaction. He'd cleaned up in here, too. She glanced across the room and cocked her head. He'd left the stage curtains open. Strange. She eyed the animatronics. They were poised in show-ready positions, frozen on the stage as if in mid-performance. Okay, Vanessa thought. Vanessa turned away from the stage, walking slowly toward the dining room's right wall. Her gaze locked on the children's drawings that covered the wall. Actually, her gaze locked on just one of the drawings. It was the one she always had to revisit. The one that called to her like a siren song. Vanessa stepped up in front of the central drawing on the wall. She stared at the image of the yellow rabbit and the 5 smiling children. She felt the blood drain from her face, as it always did when she looked at this drawing. She shivered. So we know something's up with that. So the book just now seemed to hint that Vanessa has something to do with this location right now, it seems like. Mike's car rattled up next to a black and white police cruiser parked in the spot he'd been using, near the pizzeria's front door. He stared at the police car and then looked at the pizzeria. He frowned. What's she doing here? He wondered. The cop lady is here, Abby said. Vanessa. Mike nodded but didn't respond. He was still wondering why Vanessa was here. My friends talk about her sometimes, Abby said. Surprised, Mike turned around and looked at Abby. What do they say? Abby shrugged. That she's nice? Mike looked back at Vanessa's cruiser. He liked Vanessa, but he wasn't so sure he liked that she was here now. Mike returned his attention to Abby. If I told you to wait in the car, would you? He asked. Abby rolled her eyes. Probably not. At least she's honest, he thought. He sighed and opened his car door, but before he could throw a leg out of the car, Abby had flung her door open, bounded out of the car, and was racing for Freddy's entrance. Abby, wait! The night sky was a quilt of black and gray, so tightly tucked in that the moon couldn't peek out at all. The building's lights were out, so a legion of walking dead or angry robots could have been lurking, and Mike couldn't have seen them. Mike hustled to grab Abby's things in his own backpack. He locked up the car and rushed after his sister. You can't do that, Mike clucked out when he caught up to her. It's not safe. Abby was hopping from one foot to the other in front of the locked door. She threw Mike a look that made him feel like a fuddy-duddy. He gave in and unlocked the door. As soon as the door was open, Abby brushed past Mike and ran through the lobby. She scampered toward the archway. I'm back! She called as she breezed into the dining room. The front door of Freddy's clanked shut. Mike, still not happy with Abby cavorting with giant robots, or ghosts, dropped his backpack and Abby's things and trotted after his sister. Abby, wait up! Mike reached the archway just in time to watch Abby wave at Vanessa, who stood near the wall of children's drawings. "Hey, Vanessa!" Abby sang out. Vanessa, Mike noted, didn't look the least bit surprised to see Abby. Vanessa waved at his sister's back as she darted toward the stage, where the animatronics were clustered as stiff as statues. Mike, torn between his need to talk to Vanessa and his imperative to keep Abby safe, hesitated in the middle of the dining room. He was, therefore, close enough to see Vanessa's reaction when the animatronics stopped being statues and began galumphing furry robots, making awkward attempts to play like children. Abby scrambled up onto the stage to meet her friends as Vanessa ambled over to stand next to Mike. Vanessa said nothing, and neither did he. They both just watched Abby and the animatronics in silence. "Hey, Sonic Boys 07, how you doing tonight?" Giggling, Abby poked Chica in the middle of her bib and shouted, "Tag, you're it!" Chica opened her beak in a big grin and gracelessly darted off behind the half-open stage curtains. Abby and the others watched for a few seconds, then started chasing the chick. It's like watching a bunch of Frankenstein's monsters at play, Mike thought. Vanessa elbowed Mike lightly. "Hey, Mike." Mike kept his gaze on the animatronic antics on the stage. "Vanessa," he responded. They both continued looking straight ahead. Mike kept his face blank, primarily because he hadn't decided which of his battling emotions was going to win. "I guess you figured it out," Vanessa said. Mike finally turned toward her. He shot her a "you think" look. Vanessa was giving him a half smile, but her gaze was empty. He couldn't tell what she was feeling any more than he could figure out his own emotions. "You mean, did I figure out that there are ghost children possessing giant robot animals?" Mike asked. "Yeah, thanks so much for the heads up on that." "Technically," Vanessa said, "they're animatronics, not robots." A squeal of laughter turned them both back toward the stage. Apparently the tag game was over. Bonnie was giving Abby a piggyback ride. Mike really wanted to get Abby away from the giant robot rabbit. Every protector instinct in his body was screaming, "No!" But Abby was clearly thrilled. Good, how about you? I'm doing pretty well. Thank you. Good to hear you're doing well, but I'm doing well, and I'm doing well doing well myself. Thank you for asking. He turned back to Vanessa. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa pursed her lips. "I did say I'd check on you." She nodded toward Abby. "So, what's she doing here, Mike?" "Can't reach my babysitter." Vanessa's half smile had disappeared. She'd replaced it with her top stare, which was dialed up to an 11. "Hey, you guys!" Abby called. "We need help!" Chapter 18. "So, Mike, what are your plans for the evening?" Mike thought. "Well, I'm going to build a fort with my sister, 4 fuzzy animatronics, and a cop." That is kind of a funny thought to have in your head. Like, he may be annoyed, but in our heads, it's kind of a funny moment there. One of the few actually funny moments in this book, compared to God knows how many scary moments are in here. Mike shook his head at the absurdity of everything as he stood with the animatronics and Vanessa. They were clustered in a circle on the stage, and they were all looking down at Abby, who was scribbling on her drawing pad. Under the heading fort, she was sketching a rudimentary structure. "It needs to be big," Abby said as her pencil skimmed over the paper, "so we can all fit inside." Mike couldn't take it anymore. "Wait," he said. "Hold on. I know this is very exciting and new, Abs, but I think we need to set up some ground rules. Okay? I mean, these things," He gestured at the behemoths who stood with him. Are big and probably dangerous, so... He turned to Vanessa, who stood next to Bonnie. What do you think? Some of the tables over there are probably still strong enough to use for the fort, Vanessa said. Vanessa's like, I don't care what you think. I want to play along with these guys. Gotta go. I have a school in the morning about it. Alright, Sonic. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't got my glasses on, so I gotta look a bit closer to my screen. Alright, Sonic boys, thank you for stopping by. Have a good rest of your night and good school day tomorrow. And Dirk's Greasy Reviews, how you doing tonight? Hey buddy, good to see you. Good to see you too. How you been? Hope you've been doing well. Getting back to the book. Abby turned to look at the pile of furniture Mike had left on one side of the dining room. She smiled. Everyone, follow me! Abby jumped up and leaped off the stage. As she ran toward the table and chair pile, Mike met Vanessa's gaze. She grinned at him and shrugged. The animatronics were already stomping across the stage to follow Abby. Why not? Mike thought as he and Vanessa trailed after them. For the next several minutes, Abby went from being Abby the little girl to Abby the construction foreman. Waving her hands and pointing her finger and standing with her fists on her hips while she waited for her orders to be fulfilled, Abby set the animatronics and Mike and Vanessa to work, untangling the pile of broken and battered furniture. The animatronics were uncommonly strong. Mike wasn't sure if that strength was robotic or ghostly, and he didn't want to think about it. Therefore, it didn't take much time for them to extract several tables and chairs that were, though beaten up by the vandals, structurally sound. Once these materials were gathered, Abby directed Mike and Vanessa and the robots in the assembly of a wacky-looking four-sided structure. The arrangement of tables and chairs would not have passed any building code on the planet, but it was unexpectedly fun to build. Mike surprised himself when he began laughing along with Abby and Vanessa as they worked with the animatronics. He even contributed his own ideas to the structure, tapping into his own enjoyment of building things. He came up with a way to interweave the chairs that helped everything be more stable. Of course, the big robots didn't speak, but they were capable of acting goofy without words. Freddy, for instance, staggered around with a chair balanced on his nose, and Foxy pretended to use a table as a pirate boat. The Fox animatronics pantomime of riding ocean waves was so convincing that Mike found himself calling out, Avast, ye land lubbers! It sort of a big smile from Vanessa and an eruption of giggles from his sister. Mike couldn't honestly remember the last time he had such a good time. When they'd managed to stack the tables 3 high and get them linked together with chairs long enough to be relatively stable, Abby had stepped back and assessed her minion's work. It needs to be higher, she decreed. Mike, Vanessa, and the animatronics exchanged looks. Mike knew he was getting used to the big metal beasts, but he easily read skepticism in their expressions. When no one moved, Abby said, Come on, guys, more tables! You heard the boss, Mike said to the animatronics. He tried to ignore the flutter of fear in his belly when they all turned and flashed their big teeth his way. Without the use of a crane, Mike didn't know how they'd stack more tables on the already tall structure, but he figured he'd humor Abby. Once they'd gathered the tables, she'd seen it was a futile endeavor and she'd give up. Or so he thought. Mike, however, had underestimated the animatronics, both their devotion to Abby and their teamwork. A few minutes later, he was watching in awe as Bonnie and Freddy, each gripping 2 legs of a table, rode on Chica's and Foxy's shoulders. Thus elevated, they managed to lift the table to the top of the stack. If they could get it to balance in place, it would extend the now much taller fort almost to the dining room ceiling. Mike took Abby's hand and drew her back away from the fort as they watched Bonnie and Freddy set the table in place. Vanessa joined Mike and Abby, and all three of them looked on, breath collectively held, as Bonnie and Freddy let go of the table. The table and chair skyscraper wobbled like a giant, unsteady tower. Mike was sure it was going to come tumbling down, but it didn't. Abby broke free of Mike's grasp. She threw two triumphant fists above her head. Yes! She shouted. I'll be, Mike said. Who knew his sister had an architectural talent? She might have a career ahead of her. Abby stepped toward the animatronics. You did it! She trilled. Freddy and Bonnie, still on Chica's and Foxy's shoulders, gave each other a high five. Chica, fitting in the spirit, threw out her arms in celebration. Oops, Mike thought. He saw the cascade effect in his mind before it unfolded. Chica's movement threw off the equilibrium that was holding Bonnie and Freddy aloft. Both Bunny and Bear lost their balance. Chica stumbled one way, and Foxy reeled the other. And then there was an animatronic blur as all four metal and fur critters tumbled to the dining room floor. They hit the linoleum with a whomp that would have been bone cracking if they hadn't been made of metal. The entire dining room rattled and rolled like it was caught up in an earthquake. Mike and Vanessa had to widen their stances to stay upright, and Mike managed to grab Abby before the ripple effect of the concussion knocked her off her feet. As soon as the tremor stopped, Abby shouted, Guys! She dashed over to the upended animatronics. Vanessa was close on Abby's heels. Mike, concerned irrationally about the animatronics, hurried after Vanessa, even though he had no idea what he could do for robots if they were hurt. Abby reached the heap of fur and exposed metal. Are you okay? She asked. A few seconds of squirming robotic limbs and more thuds on the floor. Then four fuzzy thumbs shot up through the convulsing bundle. Mike couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing. Vanessa and Abby quickly joined him. After that, Mike pretty much forgot that the animatronics were animatronics, so much so that when they all crawled inside of their completed fort, Mike had no problem lying on his back next to Foxy. He did, however, prefer the warmth of Vanessa, who was pressed up against his other side. Mike thought the complete fort was incredibly well fort-like once it was done. After the animatronics had righted themselves, everyone had worked together to fill in the gaps in their edifice and with more chairs. The result was a structure that had remarkable symmetry, an equal number of chairs tucked between the lanes of each table, and even a semblance of style. Mike thought the combination of chrome tables and plastic chairs created a pretty cool modernistic design. And as soon as he had that thought, he snorted inwardly. What was happening to him? He just built a fort with possessed animatronics, and now he was getting all artsy-fartsy. I like it in here, Vanessa said. Me too, Abby said. Hey, Hads, how you doing tonight? Good to see you too. The animatronics were, of course, silent, but four robotic thumbs reached into the air again. The repeated gesture made Mike smile. But I think, Abby went on, that it's going to rain soon. She sat up. And my friends can't get wet because they're made of electricity. Sounds like we need a roof, Vanessa said before Mike could pooh-pooh his sister's critique of what they'd built. Vanessa's knuckles grazed Mike's. He liked the feel of her skin against his. Mike, Vanessa said, why don't we see what we can find? Mike trailed Vanessa down the back hallway. Dusty, musty, and even darker than the front hallway, this part of Freddy's wasn't his favorite. What are we looking for exactly? Mike asked. Tablecloths. They used to keep them back here. Vanessa gestured down the hall. for big events. Mike shot a look at Vanessa. She had an awful lot of knowledge about this place. It was one thing, he thought, to know the building's layout and its history, but she knew about tablecloths and where they are kept? What was up with that? Mike eyed Vanessa's back as she stepped ahead of him and opened a closed door. She disappeared through the doorway. Remind me of how you know stuff like that, Mike called after her. Silence came from behind the door. Mike frowned. The mystery of Vanessa was starting to really bug him. He clamped his teeth together and went after her. Right, Mike thought, remembering his tour of the building as he stepped into an even mustier space. This was the main storage room. Cluttered with stacks of collapsing boxes and decorated with cobwebs, the storage room was stuffed with several rows of floor-to-ceiling metal shelves. The shelves, and everything else in the room, appeared to have escaped the vandal's attention. All was the same as it had been the last time he'd been in here. Midway along the outermost row of dust-laden shelving, a smaller door gaped open. It was the entrance to the boiler room. From the scrapping and tapping within that room, Mike could tell Vanessa was in there. He stepped forward and looked through the door. Sure enough, Vanessa was off to one side of the boiler, rummaging in a semi-crushed cardboard box on the top of a leaning stack of similar boxes. Mike wrinkled his nose. The boiler room smelled like rotten eggs. He knew the smell came from sulfur gas, which emanated from the growth of bacteria encouraged by the warm, moist, enclosed spaces in the boiler. He hated that smell. Mike backed away from the boiler and left Vanessa to her tablecloth hunt. He moved farther into the storage room. Just to amuse himself, he started scanning the shelves. He hadn't looked around much when he'd been in here before. Mike reached the end of the one row, which contained nothing but empty shelves or shelves stacked with pizza pans. He started to turn and go up the next row, which had a table of kitchen utensils and janitorial supplies, but then his gaze landed on. Mike's step faltered. He stopped and stared. Sitting on the ground, leaning against the gray cement messages blocks of the storage room's back wall, a small, about 3 foot tall, clearly decommissioned animatronic sat with her legs stretched out in front of her. With rosy cheeks like those of the balloon boy doll that Mike disliked intensely, the animatronic, which was actually more doll-like than robot-like, had red pigtails and a frilly skirted dress. Beneath the sweetly smiling doll face, the animatronic's chest was hinged open. The metal cavity was bordered by a gruesome cage of severe-looking steel ribs. The contrast of the girly face and the shiny metal spoke-like protrusions was sinister. Uh-oh. What are you? Mike asked. Intrigued in spite of himself, Mike dropped to his heels and started extending a hand toward the lethal-looking tip of one of the ribs. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Vanessa's voice so startled Mike that he fell back onto his butt. He looked up. She gestured at the metal ribs. They're called spring locks. A lot of the older animatronic models have them. Vanessa's irises did the light blue to dark blue thing. Mike saw the familiar muscle twitch in her jawline. She took a step back and foraged through the junk on the shelves. She pulled out a broom. The spring locks are designed to keep the animatronic parts locked in place so a person can safely wear the suit. Vanessa stepped forward in a flash and jabbed the handle of the broom into the animatronic's chest cavity. A loud series of mechanical snaps clapped out of a swift, almost hip-hop sounding rhythm. The rib spring closed. The broom's wood handle cracked in half. They're unstable, Vanessa said unnecessarily. Mike knew his mouth was hanging open. He inched away from the animatronic and then looked up at Vanessa. People wore these? Mike returned his gaze to the metal spring locks. You'd have to be suicidal to, like I said, unstable. Mike looked back toward Vanessa. Her eyes had turned an even deeper blue, navy blue now, almost black. Her chin was lifted and her eyes were slit nearly closed. Who is this woman? Mike asked himself. He was almost afraid to move, afraid that she would. A muffled burst of rock music reached into the storage room. Mike's head whipped into that direction. What now? It's just the show music, Vanessa said. The animatronics are probably putting on a performance for Abby. Vanessa's voice was flat. She wasn't smiling. Mike stood and brushed himself off. Yeah, he said, and Abby is probably dancing with them. His tone was light, and he smiled. He wanted to shift the mood, which was desolate. He could almost feel waves of despondency radiating from Vanessa. Anything else you want to let me in on? Mike asked. Killer clowns, fire-breathing dragons. Vanessa's expression didn't change. I'm just curious, Mike went on, since you somehow seem to know everything about this place. Vanessa turned away. That angered Mike. He took a step toward her and raised his voice. What if Abby had come in here? He shouted. What if she'd found that thing? He pointed at the animatronic, even though Vanessa wasn't looking at him. Vanessa spun back toward Mike. Now her expression had changed. Her eyes were almost spitting sparks. You brought her here, Mike. You brought her, Mike. Not me. Mike had no response for that. The coals of Vanessa's eyes cooled. Just a little. What I still can't wrap my head around is why. Honestly. Why do you bring her? Mike thought about lying, but maybe he and Vanessa should stop that crap. I think the kids know who took my brother, he said. Vanessa's brows rose nearly to her hairline. Her anger was gone. Mike rushed to explain. I think that they're connected somehow. It's hard to explain, but when I'm here, I feel closer to Garrett. My dreams are more vivid, almost like I can change what happened. Vanessa filled in. How does she know? Mike asked himself. Have you asked them about this? Vanessa persisted. One of them. He seems to speak for the others. Blonde-haired boy? He nodded. I don't think he likes me very much, but he likes Abby. And you figure if he won't tell you, he'll tell her. Mike shrugged. Vanessa put her hands on her hips. She sneered at him. How stupid can you be? Mike bristled at both her posture and her expression, but he said evenly, I'm sorry? Mike, you need to stop. Mike's bristles turned into spikes. Honestly, he threw at her. I don't really see how it's any of your business. Vanessa, as if transporting herself through the space between them, was in Mike's face. She grabbed his shirt collar. Her breath smelled sharp, even bitter. When she spoke, she nearly growled. I'm telling you to let this go. Mike couldn't have been any more taken aback if he'd been nose to muzzle with a snarling tiger. And maybe his reaction was plastered to his face because Vanessa once again moved in a flash. This time she whipped back, ending up 3 feet away from him. Vanessa seemed to shrink into herself. Her face was bright red, and she dropped her gaze to the floor. Mike didn't take pity on her shame. Instead, he blurted out the question that wouldn't leave his head. Who the hell are you? Vanessa shrugged her shoulders. She didn't look up. Someone, she said almost in a low voice, who's trying to help you. She raised her gaze. You idiot. The last was said with a little more strength, but at least she didn't growl at him again. And apparently she was done. She strode away. Mike heard the rustle of the papers. Footsteps. A slammed door. Well, since we're on this page, I want to go ahead and take a break. I'm not going to end the stream. I'm going to go ahead and take a break and get me some tea. Just be right back. I'll be right back. Shouldn't take me too long. Alright. I have returned. And we're gonna continue with the story. I got me some tea so that way I can read them at certain points. So that way I don't get too terribly tired. But anyway. Actually, let me see something here. Where is it? Oh, there. Yeah, it's right there in front of my face. It's right there in front of my face. Yep. Alright. Chapter 19. Yeah, let me move this a bit closer. Alright. I think that's close enough. Chapter 19. When Mike burst into the dining room, close on Vanessa's heels, he found Abby doing exactly what he'd predicted she was doing. She was dancing. Sort of. Abby was up on the stage with the animatronics, and she was throwing her hips back and forth like an Elvis impersonator. Bonnie was copying her. Vanessa's boot-clad feet thumped across the dining room floor. Mike looked her way. Her head down, her shoulders still bowed inward. Vanessa was going for the exit. Mike ran after her. Vanessa, wait! Mike caught up to Vanessa. He grabbed her arm and yanked on it, forcing her to face him. Vanessa's cheeks were stained with tears. As if his fingers were getting burned, he let go of her. Talk to me, Mike said quietly. Vanessa wiped her face with the back of her hand. I'm trying. She won't listen. Mike grabbed his head to hold in the that wanted to come out of his mouth. He took a deep breath, then dropped his hands. I need to know what happened that day. Don't you get it? Finding the guy who took Garrett is the only thing that matters. Vanessa shook her head. She opened her mouth, closed it, took a breath, exhaled. She looked to her right, toward the children's drawings. She frowned. Mike thought Vanessa looked like someone who had wanted to confess something. But what? Vanessa's throat convulsed. She bit her lip. Then she managed. You don't understand. Then explain it to me! Vanessa's gaze locked on Mike's. She set her jaw and took a deep breath. He was sure she was finally going to open up and... Vanessa seemed to flip a switch. Every muscle in her body tensed. Her eyes, focused past Mike, shot wide. What? Mike began. Vanessa took a halting step toward the stage. Mike started to turn. Vanessa yelled, No! Mike completed his turn. On the stage, Abby was laughing euphorically. Bonnie was holding his guitar out to Abby, inviting her to try playing it. Abby eagerly accepted it. She flung the strap over her shoulder and positioned the guitar across her chest and belly. Mike frowned. An inner red alert alarm was going off, but why? Abby, don't! Vanessa screamed. Vanessa was well past Mike now, sprinting toward the stage. Instinctively, Mike followed her. As he took his first step, Mike's memory bangs put an urgent return on his inner screen. Red hot and bursting with bright color, sparks spewed from Bonnie's guitar. Abby! Mike shouted. He held out a hand like he could make like a magician and stop what was about to happen. Mike wasn't a magician. All he could do was watch as everything unfolded in snatches, like Mike was seeing a series of still photographs. A grinning Abby strumming a hand over the guitar fret. The grin disappearing. Abby's eyes drawn together in confusion. A burst of blinding white light. Abby disappearing in the incandescence. All Abby could see was the brightest of lights. It was light, blinding her. All Abby could hear was the high-pitched ringing, like an alarm, only louder. It hurt her eyes. Abby rubbed her eyes. She pressed her hands to her ears. And then the white light was gone, but it left teensy little stars in her eyes. Abby blinked. Mike's face and Vanessa's and the faces of all Abby's friends were inches from Abby's. All the faces above Abby looked weird, distorted, and really scared. Abby shook her head like a dog, trying to stop the ringing in her ears. She blinked again. What happened? She asked Mike. Before Mike could answer, Vanessa leaned in and hugged Abby. Tight. Vanessa let Abby go and leaned back. Abby saw Vanessa's gaze flip to Mike. Mike was still staring at Abby. He looked guilty, like he'd done something really bad. He still didn't answer Abby's question, but Vanessa did. It was an accident, sweetheart, she said. Just a silly accident. Crickets chirped madly in the trees that surrounded Freddy's parking lot. Mike couldn't see either the trees or the crickets. The pizzeria's exterior lights were out, and the moon had left the night sky. So had the stars. The sky looked like one broad dome of soot so thick that Mike was finding it hard to remember what daytime felt like. Mike and Vanessa stood next to her cruiser. They both looked toward the back seat of his car, where Abby was curled up, hugging Dolph. "Thank you," Mike said to Vanessa. Mike was leaving the pizzeria mid-shift. Vanessa was going to cover for him. Vanessa shook off the gratitude. "Just go home, Mike. Take care of your sister." Mike nodded, but he didn't move. He pulled his gaze from Abby and he put it on Vanessa. What is it you're so afraid of?" he asked. Vanessa showed him a look he couldn't read. "In the storage room," he pressed. "I saw your eyes. You were terrified." Vanessa's face instantly did the rock-hard thing again. The caring Vanessa was gone. Enigmatic Vanessa, grim Vanessa, brooding Vanessa, they were all back. They stomped a foot. "Do whatever you want with your life," Vanessa flung at Mike. "But if you ever bring Abby back here, I'll shoot you." Okay, can we just go on the record? Can I just go on the record and say that just went from 0 to 100 real fucking quick? Like, I get you don't want him to bring Abby back, and after what just happened, I get it. But did you really have to go that far, even if you were exaggerating? Really? It's actually the first time I ever had something to say in regarding to what was said in the book. Vanessa squinted her eyes and leaned toward Mike. He didn't need her to pull a gun to convince him she might actually be serious. Vanessa stormed back into Freddy's. Mike waited until the slam of the heavy metal door quieted the crickets for an instant. As the crickets chirped back into clear, Mike got in his car. She looked really mad," Abby said from the back seat. "She's fine." "Why does everyone always look at you that way?" Mike turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered. "Everything is fine," Mike said. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, Mike. I'm just saying. Everything was not fine. Mike sat at his kitchen table and watched the first hint of dawn begin sneaking in through his window. From the intensity of the early light, Mike concluded that the clouds that had hid the moon during the night had moved off. Mike wished his own personal clouds would move on, but they appeared to be stuck over his head with super glue. Not even Mike's soul-flogging push-ups had managed to clear his stormy skies. The sounds of Abby's snores, a little louder than usual, reached him from her room. He couldn't believe he was about to do what he was about to do. But what choice did he have? Vanessa was right. He couldn't take Abby back to Freddy's. Sighing and feeling like he was going to throw up, Mike lifted his phone. He punched in a number. As soon as he heard the click on the other end of the line, Mike spoke. He had to while he still had the stomach for it. "Hey, it's Mike," he said. "I need your help." As soon as he said them, he immediately regretted his words. 2 hours later, Mike still hated the choice he'd made, but he was trying to make the best of it. The sun was full out now. It intruded into the kitchen and tried to convince Mike he was doing the right thing. Checking the pancakes on the griddle, Mike started some bacon in a cast iron skillet. The sweet and savory smells came together and attempted to join with the son's all is well message. Mike wasn't buying it. Deliberately keeping his back to the kitchen table, because he couldn't look at what he'd done. He kept cooking anyway. He finished everything and stuck it in the oven to keep warm. Then he took a deep breath and went to wake up Abby. Hmm. Now is where the crazy things are about to happen. I'm gonna get a drink for this bit. Because I bet you can get if you've been watching the story, watching the book reading, or have watched the movie, you already know where this is going with what he had to do. We all know why he's doing what he's doing. But we all know someone isn't going to take too kindly to it, even if she knew why he was doing it. Abby opened her eyes and saw her brother sitting at the edge of her bed. Yawning, she grinned at him. Then she noticed what her nose was telling her. Is that bacon? She asked. Cool. They didn't usually have bacon, and Abby loved bacon. I was like, cool. There we go. Why don't you get dressed and come to the kitchen when you're ready? Mike said. There's something we need to talk about. Abby frowned. Uh-oh. Was he bribing her with bacon? She shrugged. So what? It was bacon. Mike left the room and Abby jumped out of bed. Popping into the bathroom, she did all the usual morning stuff. Then she went back in her room and dressed in her maroon corduroy overalls with a gold shirt, because she was sure it was going to be a gold star day. Then she slipped down the hall to get her bacon. I'm ready for... Abby stopped mid-skip when she saw who was sitting at the kitchen table. The bacon was a bribe, not a big enough one. There's my favorite little girl, Abby's Aunt Jane said. Abby tried to make her aunt, with her stupid short hair and her dumb old pale blue pantsuit, disappear with laser eyes. Abby wrinkled her nose, choking on her aunt's stupid grapefruity perfume. Abby, come sit down, Mike said. Abby turned the laser eyes on Mike, but she couldn't hold the laser. Her head turned to hurt. What did you do? She asked her brother. Abby could tell Mike knew she was upset, but he was pretending he didn't. Come sit down, he said again. We need to talk. Abby shook her head. No way. She started retreating from the kitchen, backing down the hall. I know what you're thinking, Mike said. I promise you're wrong. Please, Abby, let's just talk. Abby looked at her aunt, then she returned her gaze to Mike. His face looked like he was trying to eat a pot of Brussels sprouts. No, his face looked like he couldn't stand to be him. I hate you, Abby said to him. Abby turned and ran back to her room. As she went in and slammed the door, she heard her aunt say, I think that went well. Shut up, woman. She really needs to shut up. Really, I hate that trope when things clearly went wrong and one of the characters have to be one of the people in the camera had to be like, oh, that went well, and it's like, no, it didn't. Shut up. I honestly do not like it when characters do that. To me, that's just stupid. Stupid. Back to the book. Putting her back to her door, Abby closed her eyes and clutched her hair in both hands. She let out a cross between a howl and a roar. Tears took over her eyes and forced them open. She couldn't stop the tears from pouring down her cheeks, but she rubbed them away as fast as they flowed. Abby's gaze landed on her desk and her drawings. She stomped toward her desk and threw herself in her chair. Jerking open the desk drawer, Abby dug around in it and found the biggest, blackest marker she had. Then she reached for the stack of her most recent drawings, fisting the marker, as then holding it with a grip, by the way. I'm just saying, in case some people, for whatever reason, get the messed up wrong idea. Abby started to black out every image of her brother that she could find. Mike couldn't look at his aunt as he grabbed his keys and pulled on his coat. She reminds me of you, Jane said, always with the temper. Mike tried to look at Jane, figuring she was trying to pick a fight. He was surprised when he found her looking up at him with a softer than normal expression. If Mike had known better, he might have believed she was looking at him with fondness. Nah. When she calms down, Mike said, tell her I'm sorry, and I'll be back soon. When is soon exactly? You've been a little fuzzy with the details. There was the snarky Aunt Jane Mike knew, and didn't love. Soon, Mike said. Aunt Jane shooed Mike away. Go then. Mike turned toward the door. But Mike, Jane said to his back, there's a larger conversation that still needs to happen here. When you get back, you and I are going to talk. She picked up a piece of bacon and nibbled on it. The image of a vulture chewing on carrion flashed through Mike's mind. He practically ran from his house. Alright. Clutching the white bag that the pharmacist had put Mike's refilled prescription in, Mike stalked toward Freddy's entrance doors. The elderly druggist's judgmental advice. You know what works for me? A warm glass of milk with chamomile and honey. The played in Mike's head as he went. Right back at you, Mike thought now. A crow let out a long cackle. Mike looked up into the trees around Freddy's. He couldn't find the crow, but his gaze landed on the wood cut out of Freddy Fazbear's head. The bear's grin seemed to be jeering at Mike. Stuff it, Mike said. He let himself inside the pizzeria and went directly to the office. There, Mike wasted no time. He plopped in the desk chair, set up his cassette player, and dry swallowed 3 of the white pills from the bottle he'd pulled from the white bag. He locked his gaze on the poster opposite the desk. Maybe because he was so determined, or maybe because he hadn't slept well in days, the effect of Mike's routine was immediate. His vision blurred as he listened to the sound of the wind and the trees coming from the cassette. His lids fluttered closed. Sunlight is warm on Mike's shoulders as he walked forward. The breeze picks up a lock of his hair. It tickles his cheek. Mike hears laughter and he looks toward it. Stunned, he stares at his family, all gathered by the picnic table. Mike's mom's sitting at the table for lunch. His dad is standing next to her. He's spinning an overjoyed Barrett around like a spiraling airplane. Barrett's laughter fills the campsite. All right, Mike's mom says. Enough games, you two. Mike's mom hangs open as he watches his dad swim toward the picnic table with Garrett. Emergency landing! Mike's dad shouts. His dad makes a whooshing sound as he sweeps Garrett's spread eagled body over the table. Mike's dad plunks the boy onto the table with a flourish. with a flourish. Then Mike's dad looks toward Mike. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy, Mike's dad calls out. Don't just stand there, his mom says to Mike. Come and dig in. Mike's parents settle on the table's benches. Gary climbs off the tabletop and joins them. Then the boy turns and gives Mike the biggest, most adorable, happy kid smile Mike has ever seen. Mike's eyes are awash in tears. His mom looks his way. Sweetie, what's wrong? Mike wipes his eyes. He clears his throat. Mike wipes his eyes and clears his throat. This isn't... He stumbled back from the picnic table. This isn't the way it happened. He shakes his head. This isn't real. Mike's parents and Garrett exchange confused glances. But it could be. The voice is coming from behind Mike. It's a child's voice. Mike turns to find the blond boy and the other 4 children standing behind him. He shakes his head again, this time more vehemently. He bites his lips. His hands are clenched into fists. What is this? Mike asks the blond boy. This isn't what I asked for. The blond boy cocks his head. No, he said, but it's what you want. More head shaking from Mike. He's trying to erase the entire scene by rejecting it. I want to find... Mike begins. You're lying! The blond boy interrupts. Mike looks at the ground. You want to save Garrett, the boy says. That's really why you're here. Mike tries another head shake, but it's a feeble one. You want to change what happened, the boy said. You want to go back. Mike throws up a hand as if to shield himself from the boy's words. It's not possible, he said. He says. He's gone. They all are. Really? The boy points past Mike. Even though he doesn't want to, Mike turns around and looks at his family. They're staring back at him with concern and compassion. And hope. Derek swivels off the wooden bench and dashes toward Mike, who drops to his knees. He's eye to eye with his little brother. You can have this dream every night, the blond boy says. You can be together like before. The boy's voice drops to a near whisper. You can change what happened. Mike's head shakes, have turned into a tentative nod. His tears have escaped his eyes. They are rivulets sluicing down his cheeks. Mike looks at the blond boy. How? You said we could have anything we wanted, the blond boy says. It's only fair. He steps up close to Mike and leans in. Mike expects to feel the boy's warmth, but a puff of chilly air touches Mike's ear as the boy says in a gentle whisper. We want Abby. Mike wipes at his tears. His face twisted. He's struggling to grasp. Mike's eyes widen. He gets it now. Abby, he whispers. Garrett clutches Mike's hand. They love her, Mike, Garrett says. And she loves them. Mike looks at Garrett. Mucus runs from Mike's nostrils, joining his tears. He sniffs. It's for the best, buddy, Mike's dad calls from the picnic table. It really is. Mike looks over at his dad, who smiles reassuringly. Even as racked as he is, Mike can't help but return the smile. Mike's mom chimes in. You've seen her with him. You've seen how happy she is. Mike looks over at his mom. She's tearing up too. Doesn't she deserve a real family? His mom asks as she gets up and comes over to kneel next to Mike. She uses her thumb to wipe tears from his cheeks. Mike's tentative nod is becoming more assured. It's time to let her go, sweetie, his mom says. You were never the right person to take care of her. Now Mike's nod is emphatic. He's not just nodding because he wants to believe her. He does believe her. He agrees with what he's hearing. Mike looks from his mom to his dad to Garrett. His conviction solidifies. Okay, Mike says. He nods one last time. Yes. The blond boy lifts one side of his mouth in a small, satisfied smile. Mike looks again at his brother. His gaze lands on the flop of hair that was obscuring Garrett's eyes. Mike reaches out to brush the lock of hair back. His hand stops in mid-motion. The sun's spotlight suddenly glares in Mike's eyes, and he feels its heat. It catapults him out of the campsite and into a memory. Mike's vision turns inward. He sees his sleeping sister in his mind. He knows he's sitting on the side of her bed. He sees his hand reach out and brush a lock of her hair from her face. He's in a memory, he realizes. But then the memory becomes something else. It becomes more of a vision, something Mike wanted to experience instead of something he experienced in the past. In Mike's mind, Abby's eyes open. She's groggy, but she smiles at him. You're home, she says. In his mind, Mike smiles at his sister. I'm home, he says. The picture in Mike's mind disintegrates. He's back at the campsite. The sun disappears behind a cloud. In the instant shade, Mike stares at Garrett. Mike realizes his hand is still touching the lock of Garrett's hair. Mike pulls his hand back. With that motion, it seems like the veil drops away. Garrett's face is startlingly pale. Too pale. And his eyes are wrong. The adorable Garrettness is gone from Garrett's eyes. Mike's brother's eyes have turned to deep wells of hollowness. Mike staggers to his feet. Wait! This isn't... He looks at his parents. They too are pale now. They too have bottomless eyes. Mike returns to head shaking. This is wrong, he says. I'm sorry, but I don't want this. You hear me? I don't want it! Mike spins to confront the blond boy, but the boy and the other children are gone. Mike scans the campsite and can't find them. He turns back to his family is gone too. Everyone has vanished. Mike is completely alone. Mike hears the tree branches swish. The wind picks up. A creak of branches. Through the sounds of the wind and the trees, a chorus of whispers start to build in volume. The content of the whispers is indistinct at first. It's just a susurration, a susurration, a white noise. But then the whispers begin to separate into something clear. Abby, the whispers say. Mike turns in a circle. It's the children, he realizes. Their voices are taunting him. He turns and he turns, trying to find the kids. Listen to me, Mike shouts. You stay away from her! The whispers are louder now. Abby! Mike screams, Stay away from my sister! The whispers stop, replaced by a giggle, then a rush of footsteps. Mike whirls toward the sound. All he sees is a blur of motion, and then a paper hook arcs toward him. A bullet of heat scores into his chest. Gasping, Mike throws up a hand toward his chest. Before he can get it there, he sees another blur. This time, it's the top hat. The boy wearing it rakes claws across Mike's back. Mike cries out and flounders in a circle. He doesn't see anything but trees. A flurry of motion out of Mike's range of vision precedes another lava flow of pain. This one courses through his left calf. Mike's legs go out from under him. He tries to curl into a ball, but the scourging pain stops him. The strikes land too fast for him to defend himself. His clothes are being shredded. Mike falls back, lying prone in the dirt. Above him, the wind picks up. He hears a whir, low and soft. Mike looks up in the trees. His vision is hazy. The tone of the whirring changes. It no longer sounds like wind. It sounds mechanical. Mike's lids flutter. He's giving in to the pain, but when the grinding metal on metal sound gets even louder, his eyes bug open. So actually, there's 26 chapters including the prologue, actually, now that I look. You know what? I think I'll read chapter 20. Then, hey, Bryce Seymour, how you doing tonight? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 20 and then call it a stream. And we'll see what, and I'll probably do something else tomorrow. Maybe read the rest of this book tomorrow night, but probably do something before that. We shall see. But for now, I'm going to read chapter 20, and that'll be the end of this stream. Chapter 20. The mechanical thrum was deafening now, almost as loud as helicopter rotors. The sound demanded Mike return to full consciousness. Mike tried to get his eyes to zero in on whatever. Excuse me. Mike tried to get his eyes to zero in on whatever was causing the head-splitting sound. His eyes weren't fully cooperating, but they were giving him glimpses. Mike struggled to process what he was seeing. His head was pounding because the visual snatches were coming at him like they were being hit with a strobe light. Mike saw a robotic arm suspended above his head. A bear mask peeled open, held by the arm. Honed bits of metal inside the mask, like miniature but lethal knives in constant motion. Mike's brain brought his sight completely back online, and Mike put it all together. He was lying on his back, on a hard metal surface, a reclining chair, and he was looking at the inside of a robotic mask full of sharp, continually moving metal. The mask was coming toward his face. Oh, thank you, Heads. Thank you, Heads. Mike yelped and tried to get up. That's when he realized that he was bound in the chair. Steel bands were clamped around his wrists. A heavy leather strap was cinched tight around his chest. The metal juggernaut started to descend toward Mike's face. He did the only thing he could do. He brought every muscle he had into play and sent them all into motion. He squirmed and twisted. Wait, what was that just now? Hold on a second. I just noticed something. Hold on a second. I want to look at that later because I just noticed something that just caught my eye as a notification. I'll look at that later. The metal juggernaut started to descend toward Mike's face. He did the only thing he could do. He brought every muscle he had into play and sent them all into motion. He squirmed and twisted and wriggled. He kicked his legs and he jolted his body up and down and side to side. Mike knew, of course, that his efforts were going to fail. He wasn't strong enough to break. Above the relentless metal churning, Mike heard a crack, a distinctive pinning crack. He knew that sound. A board had given way. Mike felt his arm fall away from him as one of the chair's armrests detached. His gaze still on the plunging mask, Mike jerked on his arm without much hope. To Mike's astonishment, the metal clamp disengaged from Mike's wrist. He had an arm free. But that wasn't enough. The mask was closer now. It was moving slowly, but unalterably, lower and lower. Sharp metal, soft face. Not a good combination. And yes, it actually does say that in the book. Frantic, Mike sent his fingers in search of something. Anything. On the side of the chair that could help him get free. He ran his fingers over an expanse of metal, thrust them between sharp gaps, and then Mike's fingers stopped on something flat and round, some kind of control button. Mike strained to see his hand, and he saw a quarter-sized green light. He didn't hesitate. He pushed the green button and... Eureka! The other wristband uncoupled. The mask was now just inches from Mike's nose. It was so close that the burring of the rotating and constantly cycling metal was blowing his hair. Feverish with the crucial need to move, Mike fumbled with the leather chest strap. Maybe because he got lucky, or maybe because necessity is the mother of getting the hell out of Dodge, Mike managed to click the strap apart and slide off the chair. His escape couldn't have come any later. The blitzing metal grazed the side of his forehead as he turned downward. Mike dropped to the floor. Metal on metal screechers told him the mask, aka Buzzsaw, was grinding into the chair. Fireflies of hot sparks seared the little hairs on Mike's arms as he rolled away from the chair. All of Mike's muscles demanded a break. He flopped into a glob of exhaustion. The continuing spray of sparks, and his understanding of his foe's strength, got Mike back into motion. He tried to stand. Fiery pain in Mike's calf sent him careening off balance. He toppled backward into jabbing metal and sticky, crusty fox fur. Mike scuttled away from what was grabbing at him. His gaze shot around him wildly. He saw a litter of faded, mudded fur covered animatronic characters. It's just costumes, Mike told himself. Again he tried to stand. This time ready for the pain, he made it. But as he wavered on his feet, he heard a peculiarly familiar hop-hop beat of snaps. Looking down, he watched the costume's clamshell open. Mike squawked and blundered backward. His hand went to his nose and mouth as the sick stench of rotting corpses hit him. No longer thinking about running because his brain was now overwhelmed by what he was seeing and smelling, Mike's stomach threatened to heave as he gazed at the mutilated remains of 3 men and Max. Mike gagged as he looked at poor Max's body. It was severed in 2. No, not severed. It looked like something had bit her in half at the waist. Her upper body lay back against one of the 2 men, and her lower body was draped across her stomach. Mike, his hand over his mouth, quickly shifted his gaze to her face. Her eyes and mouth were wide open in a rictus of pure terror. "Oh, Max," Mike whispered. Mike jerked his eyes away from her. When he did, he saw that the faces of one of the 2 men had been similarly chewed, all the way into the man's brain. Mike quickly moved his gaze to the other 2 men. One was older and one younger. Mike sucked in his breath. He recognized the younger man. It was Jeff, Max's brother. Jeff and the older guy looked like they'd been run through a meat slicer. But no, the cuts weren't straight. They were curved, like the wounds you'd get from a pirate's hook. This last thought finally galvanized Mike. He turned away from the petrifying cadavers, and he limped past the still sparkling mask and chair. He staggered toward the door. At the room's threshold, Mike paused. All the way up and down the main hallway, the lights were surging on and off, on and off. The rhythm wasn't even, though. It was chaotic, as if the lights were being manipulated by someone too enraged to stay in control. Mike squinted to see through the disoriented flashes of light and dark. It was hard to know for sure, but the hallway appeared to be empty. Mike reeled into the hall. His feet fumbling as if he'd never properly learned to walk, Mike zigged and zagged his way toward the lobby. If he could get there, he could get out of the building. Out of the building meant salvation. Excuse me. Hello, Izumi. Nice to see you again as well. How are you doing tonight? I'm actually thinking of I actually gotta do something here involving my controller. Don't worry. It's nothing too crazy. I'm actually gonna need to unmute. Because something's coming up that requires a sound bite to be used. Fine. What about you? I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. It's good to hear you're doing well yourself. Mike tried to pick up the pace. His feet shuffled faster. Just a few feet from the lobby now. From behind Mike, a crash boomed after him. A roar joined the crash. They partnered in their pursuit. Mike didn't bother to look back. He called on every ounce of strength he had, and he stepped on the gas. Managing to break into a jerky gallop, he spilled into the lobby. He threw himself toward the double doors. But when Mike hit the doors, they wouldn't open. They were locked. A new sound joined the crashing and roaring. No, not a sound. A voice. A singing voice. The lights were now going to really totally bonkers. They were winking in and out so fast that it was impossible for Mike to see what was coming toward him. But something was. Something big. Something fast. Mike summoned the last bit of his perseverance. He pounded on the heavy metal doors. Sensing rather than seeing that his time had run out, Mike looked to his left. He screamed and fell into a total eclipse of any light he'd ever seen or hoped to see. Gotta love the team, man, I'm telling you. Abby curled up in her bed, hugged Dolph tighter than she ever had, and it still wasn't tight enough. That'll be fine. Outside Abby's window, the sun was a deep red ball, hovering just above the hills in the distance. Soon it would slip out of sight. Abby thought the ball looked like a big drop of blood, like the sky was hurting and needed a bandage. Of course, Abby knew the sky wasn't hurt. She was hurt. But she wasn't hurt in a way that a bandage could help. A bandage couldn't fix the stuffed up nose and stinging eyes that hours of crying had left her with. And it couldn't fix the fact that the happiness she'd been feeling ever since she'd been united with her friends at Freddy's had been ripped away. Abby's happy was gone. That was why she kept hugging Dolph tighter and tighter and tighter. Hanging on to something familiar, something Abby loved, and who loved her, was the only thing that could stop her tears. Maybe. She hoped. It hadn't worked yet. A knock on the door caused Abby to smush Dolph even more. Abby put her face in Dolph's great blue fur. Abby, sweetheart, her Aunt Jane called through the door. Abby let go of Dolph with one arm and she pulled a blanket up over herself and the dolphin. Even though the blanket and the door, she could hear the TV in the living room. She'd heard it for hours. That stupid fake laughter coming from the TV told Abby that her Aunt Jane was watching old-timey sitcoms. You can't stay in there forever, kiddo, Aunt Jane called. Leave me alone! Abby shouted. She sniffed again. Jane's exasperated sigh came clearly through the door. Suit yourself, she said. Abby could tell that her aunt was annoyed, but who cared? She listened in satisfaction as the tap, tap, tap of the dumb high heels her aunt always wore retreated from her door. hmm. Jane gave Abby's closed door a long, searing look. Spoiled brat. The obnoxious little twit wouldn't be acting like that much longer, Jane thought as she strode back into her nephew's ratty, pathetic living room. Ah! The living room. How could anyone possibly live in such squalor? Jane sure couldn't. But she could tolerate it. For now. Jane had to keep her eye on the end goal. That was why she was here pretending to help. Oh, she was helping all right. Helping herself. Once Abby was in Jane's custody, Jane would be one step closer to getting control of the big fat trust fund that should never have been Abby's in the first place. Why Jane's father had left his money to his granddaughter instead of his daughter was beyond Jane. She understood why he hadn't left it to Jane's brother. For one thing, he disappeared off the face of the earth after he left his family. For another, he was an idiot. He never should have married such a weak woman. Okay, I'm just gonna stay for the record. The reason why some parents and grandparents would leave money, like why some grandparents would leave money for the kids, like for the youngest kid, is basically as a means for them to have a head start in life. I guess because trust me, there are things out there that are very essential to a need. The one thing that most people probably go for if they ever move out on their own would be like getting at first getting an apartment, because that would in a way teach them the basic necessities of having a roof over your head, food on the table, you know, how to clean it up properly and all that stuff. Where the house would be the next step if you and the person that you're living with owning the house are able to afford it. Maintain it, afford it, as well as keep it very well maintained. I say this knowing full well that, yeah, I say that knowing full well that I don't entirely understand all that. I say not entirely because it is my some of my responsibility does revolve around cleaning the house. But currently, I'm not the one technically. Well, in some ways, I am paying for it. In other ways, not really. But whatever. We're not going to delve into the personal side of things here. We're not going to delve into the personal side of things. We got a book to read. That makes sense now, I think. Are you Oh, okay. Okay. I was about to ask what you mean, and I realized it's basically what I just said. Alright. Curling her lip at the couch's satin cushions, Jane plopped onto one of them, wriggling to try to create a comfortable position. She reached for the TV remote and made yet another attempt to find something decent to watch on the ridiculously old television. Landing on yet another sitcom, Jane heard an odd whirring sound. You know, that kind of noise I think it'd be. Crappy TV. Must be feedback, she thought. She turned up the volume so that she could hear what was being said instead of hearing the static. Jane smoothed the creases of her pants. I'm gonna have to get this pantsuit dry cleaned, she thought. Who knew what kind of parasites were living in the grungy sofa cushions? A funny line of the TV pulled a laugh from Jane. She shook her head at the antics on the screen and Jane stopped mid-head shake. What was that? What was that? She'd caught a glimpse of movement in the kitchen. Was Mike finally home? Jane turned and opened her mouth, preparing to scolding her nephew dessert for expecting her to cool her jets in. Jane dropped the remote. Half in shadow and half in the blood-red smear of the dusk light coming through the kitchen window, a giant bear stood next to Mike's fridge. It was just a few feet from Jane, and it was staring at her with radiant white eyes. Jane closed her eyes. I'm hallucinating, she thought. Just a little time in the dreads of Mike's life and she was already losing her. Jane opened her eyes again. No way. The bear was still there, and it was taking a step toward her. Oh no, that animatronic being there is not. Absolutely not. Uh, Personally, though, I'm just going to say this much about it, because at this point, I don't think we're going to hear. Um, let me see something here. So, I just read a bit ahead because of what they say in the movie. They pretty much are not very. They are not very helpful in the. Trying to be nice and give it some tea. Oh, you want? Oh, here. Speaking of tea, let's have a drink. I swear to God, tea is literally the one thing I have drank to no end. Like, I'll drink pop here and there and sometimes milk, but I swear to God, I've been drinking tea a bit. I wouldn't say I'm addicted to tea, but I drink it more. I probably drink tea more than literally any other drink out there. That might be my the British ancestry side of me coming out because my last name, does have a bit of history. There are some people with my last name. I don't know if I'm probably related to them by blood, but I'm not entirely sure. That share my last name that do have some historical significance in the history of Great Britain. Yeah. Getting back to the book. Still under her blanket, still hugging Dolph, and crying even harder now. Abby went rigid when a big thud shook the house so hard that Abby's bed joggled beneath her. Abby shoved back the blanket and sat up. What was that? She whispered to Dolph. Dolph had no answer, but he was there to support. She was there for support when Abby got out of bed and hurried to her door. Laying her ear against the painted wood, she listened. She heard nothing except the TV. Since Abby had burrowed under the covers, the red ball in the sky had disappeared. Now just a red sheen outlined the top of the hills. Abby could see in the distance through her window. Night would be here very soon. Aunt Jane? Abby called out. Abby didn't really want Aunt Jane, but she didn't feel right about ignoring the Big Bang. The only response Abby got was more of that fakey fake laughter from the TV. Abby frowned. She looked back toward her bed. Maybe she should just get back in bed. Abby listened again. Abby listened at the door again. No, she had to know what had made that big sound. Abby reached for the doorknob, but then she hesitated. She backtracked to her desk so she would grab her drawing pad and some pencils. Abby always felt better when she had a pad and pencils in the pocket of her overalls, so she stuffed both into place. A bit more confident, Abby returned to her door and opened it. She peeked out into the hallway. Then, hesitantly, she walked down the hall toward the kitchen. It was empty. So Abby looked toward the living room where... Freddy? Abby's happy came back to her. The animatronic bear separated itself from a blobby shadow near the end of the sofa. As soon as it did, Abby could see she wasn't looking at Freddy. The bear looked like Freddy in every way, except for one obvious difference. His fur wasn't brown. It was golden. The gold was almost the color of the shirt. Abby Abby was still wearing with the maroon overalls she'd put on that morning. A golden Freddy! Wow! Abby said. She no longer cared about the miserable hours she'd just gone through. Her eyes stopped stinging. She could breathe through her nose again. Who are... Abby stopped mid-question when a little boy with tousled blonde hair, the same color as the big robotic bear's fur, magically came out of the robot. Not Freddy, the blonde boy said. Abby stared in awe at the little boy. He looked just like an ordinary boy, but not exactly. The boy was kind of sparkly, and Abby could see through him, just a wee bit. Abby thought the boy looked the way an angel might look. Abby gave the fairy tale-like boy a big smile. You came for me? She asked. The boy nodded. Everyone's waiting. It's time to go play. Abby squealed and clapped her hands. The blond boy gave her a smile and then dissolved into a shimmer that went back into Golden Freddy. The big bear gestured at Abby to follow him as he took a giant step toward the front door of the house. Abby looked down at Dolph. She didn't want to risk losing him while she was playing with the others, so she set the dolphin on the kitchen table. As she did, her gaze caught a glimpse of light blue in the living room. Abby turned. On the floor, jutting out from behind the end of the sofa, the hem of Aunt Jane's pants was visible. Her aunt's feet, still in her high heels, stuck out of the pants. The heels seemed to be lying in a pool of something. Ketchup, maybe? How had her aunt spilled ketchup behind the sofa? Silly Jane. Wait, hold on. Silly Jane, Golden Freddy said. The animatronic spoke in the little boy's voice. She fell asleep. Abby started to ask herself why her aunt would sleep on the floor and spilled ketchup, but then she shrugged. She didn't care what her aunt did. She turned and followed Golden Freddy out the front door, closing it behind her. Golden Freddy trudged stiffly off the little porch. Abby paused as she listened to his heavy footsteps. All the sun's rays was gone. It was full-on night now. A third of the moon was hovering over the concrete-sided stream across the street, and the moon's light made the bear's fur seem like it was about to catch fire. It looked really cool. Abby gazed up and down the street. How do we get to Freddy's? She asked Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy cocked his head. One of his big white eyes blinked shut and then opened again in a slow-motion wink. His teeth flashed in the moonlight as he gave Abby a wide smile. The smile was more creepy jack-o'-lantern than warm and friendly, but Golden Freddy couldn't help that. Abby knew that the animatronics couldn't move and make expressions like normal kids. That was okay. Abby had never ridden in a taxi before, so she felt a fizz of excitement when she opened the shiny yellow back door and got into it. Taking a seat, she grinned at the fun old country music playing on the radio. Oh my god, I'm reading a book that doesn't talk crap about country music! Oh my god! Took long enough. Yes, I am a fan of country music. Well, it depends on the song. Like, I'm a fan of, there are some country artists that I do like to listen to, but, it also really depends on the song. So yeah, I'm not one of the type of people that are just gonna follow the old trope on the internet and bash country music. I grew up with country music. I embraced country music. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite songs is country. It's in case anybody's wondering, it's titled "Not Ready to Make Nice" by the Chicks. Um, because to me it's like saying something in the past or like in the recent past that people are bashing you for saying. But they're pretty much saying in that song, it's kind of stupid to do that. It's very stupid to get upset over something that happened some time ago, but at the same time, it's just not worth getting upset over. Depending on what it is, you know what I mean? Like for me, I generally get upset over people that try to mock or otherwise, like, not joke, because I probably would be one of the people that would have a pass on joking about disabled people since I am disabled by the state. Um, but if you're mocking us, then I'm gonna have a problem with that. Like like there are just so many things that could irritate or otherwise upset me. Mocking people because of who they are, what they look like, because of what they look like, what kind of hardships they're going through, and things like that. Yeah, anybody who mocks people for any of that stuff that they honestly cannot really control because they got literally no other choice but to do that do what they're doing. Yeah, those people can kiss my ass because those people I just don't like those type of people at all. They go right next to the negative ists out there. The negative feminists, the negative misogynists, the racists, the sexists, the double standard douchebags, as I like to call them, etc., etc. Yeah. But we're now getting to the end of the chapter. Actually, yeah, we're about at the end of the chapter, so let's go ahead and finish it. And then that'll be the end of the stream. Abby had never ridden in a taxi before, so she felt a fizz of excitement when she opened the shiny yellow back door and got into it. Taped to the seat, she grinned at the funnel of country music playing on the radio. She looked at the back of the driver's head. All Abby could see around the driver's headrest was curly brown hair sticking out from under a dirty baseball cap that looked like it had been worn for thousands and thousands of days. The hair and the cap were bopping to the twangy music. Abby shifted her gaze to the rearview mirror and she saw crinkled green eyes looking back at her. The driver turned his head, and she noticed a toothpick sticking out between lips stretched into a friendly smile. The driver faced one again and asked, "Where to, little lady?" As Abby opened her mouth to answer the question, the other backseat door opened. The taxi settled low, really low, as Golden Freddy squeezed himself in through the door and managed to sit next to Abby. What the hell? Wait, what the hell? The driver spun around in his seat, jerking so much that he hit his head on the roof of the taxi. He spat out a toothpick and let out a shriek. If you watched the movie, you know exactly who was playing this role. and those moments were fucking hilarious, if you ask me. They were really funny moments too, the funniest moments of the movie. Abby smiled, but she didn't blame the driver for his reaction. She knew adults didn't understand. The driver's mouth hung open as he stared at Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy gave the driver one of his big grins. The driver turned around farther to look at Abby. She smiled at him sweetly. The driver shook his head, then faced the front of the taxi again. Not cool, man, he said. Not cool. Abby disagreed. She thought riding in a taxi with Golden Freddy was very cool. I don't think that's what he's saying not cool about. Muttering something Abby couldn't make out, the driver took in a loud breath. Then he put the car in gear. We want to go to the old Freddy's Pizzeria, please, Abby said. The driver eyed Abby in his rearview mirror. He shook his head. Why do I always get the weirdos? He asked. And that is going to be it for tonight. So, yeah. I know I could keep going if I wanted to because I'm not tired, but at the same time, I think we probably had a good stop. To stop it at a funny moment instead of a tense moment, I think isn't a bad idea. You know what I mean? I think it's not a bad idea because honestly, if you guys watch the movie, the same part where that happens, the driver, who is played by Corey X. Kenshin, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie, he would, instead of turning around, this is probably the only difference here. Instead of turning around to see Golden Freddy, he actually takes the rear view mirror and moves it, just because he's also thinking, what? And, like how he turns it around. And that's the jump scare moment for him, and he's just jumping. It's like, you jump too, but you laugh because he's jumping too, and you see that, and you want to laugh at that. Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening there. But yeah, so, like I said, tomorrow night I do intend to finally finish the book. We're literally right around the corner. And tomorrow, let me see something here. What day is it? I know what day it is. Okay. Okay, so today is Monday, September 30th. So I want to get this book done because on the 1st is when I start the whole Halloween season. Which means I'll probably read this book tomorrow morning or early afternoon. Because I might also do the I might do the 1K subscriber special tomorrow, which is technically today, by the way, because it is 2:32 in the morning for me. So when I say tomorrow, I mean later today, just so we're all on the same page here. But yeah. So, but right now, I might as well just say this because I don't really see it anytime soon changing. For the first book that I'll be reading for the first week of October, it's going to be, most likely, because like I last seen it, it was at 3 votes to 1 to 0. I'll double check again, but as of right now, currently, the book in the lead by 2 votes is Stephen King's Night Shift. So if this book keeps that lead tomorrow, going up until the 1st, this will be the book I read. But for one more time, I'll also show the other books. But for one more time, in case you guys want to vote for the book, so if you want to vote for the book here, you have this book, like I said, Stephen King's Night Shift. The other 3 options that you can choose from with alongside it, if you wanted to pick one of them, is Jaws by Peter Benchley, which currently sits at 1 vote And then the third option is Robert Bloch's Psycho. Robert Bloch's Psycho, which currently has no votes right now. And finally, Also with 0 votes, though. But the most recent book out of the 4 that I'm picking for the Halloween season to read, one for each week. Fantastic Land by Mike Buckoven. Oh my god, I got the name right. Without having to directly look at the name. But yeah. So to put it simply, you got a book that is 20 short stories, which I will be watching Children of the Corn to represent it. You got Jaws, which is celebrating its 50th, its 50th anniversary because the book came out in 1974, but the movie came out the next year. Then you have Psycho, celebrating its 65th anniversary this year, but the movie also celebrating 65 years since that movie came out. And then, of course, you got Fantastic Land, which to the back, it literally says this, is a modern take on Lord of the Flies meets Battle Royale. Yeah, so if you guys liked either book or movie, this book might be for you as well. But those are the books that are being voted on for the month. At least which one of the 4 to start with. Because those 4 books I'll be reading through the month of October no matter what. And then after that we'll go back to our regularly scheduled non-horror books, which I also have in front of me here. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Right? But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this part of the Five Nights at Freddy's book reading live stream. If you guys liked it, hit that like button, add it to your favorites, and share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Even on Discord, whatever you want to do with it. Either way, thank you guys for watching. You guys have a good rest of your night. And until tomorrow, until later today, this is Forrest Walpole, signing off.